Xenoblade? More like shit voice acting Blade.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before.
Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a newly released Switch exclusive, and a sequel to the original Xenoblade Chronicles 1 while pretending that Xenoblade Chronicles X never happened. This game is a story-heavy action role-playing game developed by Monolith Soft, starring protagonist Rex and his questionably proportioned friend Pyra, as they try and make it to the unoriginally named paradise called Elysium. The story takes place on some big robot dudes that died and turned to stone over a sea of clouds and shit, and these big dead dudes make up the land that people live on and shit. Also, there's big ass ships and stuff too. It's a pretty typical JRPG in that the English voice acting sucks ass, and the story is pretty anime-ish.
How may I be of service, master?
Let's just pretend that we didn't actually have to see that. At a first glance, this game can be a little overwhelming, which isn't helped by the complexity of the progression systems which branch between the driver and the blades themselves. The combat is a little non-traditional but pretty easy to get a hold of after a while. You more or less slowly build up with the auto attacks and weapon arts before unleashing a more devastating attack or a chain attack with your allies. The playable characters are all known as drivers, people that use weapons known as blades, which just so happen to also be people, often young girls. Thanks, Japan. And they all like to collect and battle each other, just like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering. One of the biggest problems I have with this game, particularly in comparison to the original Xenoblade Chronicles, is the protagonist, Rex. This guy is an annoying little fuckface, okay? His voice is pretty fucking dumb, he utters the same 2 lines every time you enter or finish combat, and he's an impetuous and unlikable dickhead. Shulk, from the original Xenoblade Chronicles, although sometimes a bit of a dipstick, was a much more likable and relatable character. In a story-driven game, especially one that spends so much time portraying the main characters in cutscenes that just never seem to fucking end, having likable and relatable characters is very important. The cutscenes in this game feel a little too plentiful. It's one thing to be story-driven, but it's also another thing to be a fucking movie with gameplay breaks in between. It's also another thing to have no real correlation between the gameplay and the cutscenes, like when you have to fight the bad guy and absolutely fuck him up in combat, only for the cutscene to play and he's kicking your ass instead. The cutscenes themselves are a little poorly animated at times, this being most prevalent in the bad lip sync animation, which looks like Monolith just don't give a shit about the lip sync in any other version of the game but Japanese. A lot of the fighting animation in cutscenes is pretty fluid and nice, but the more idle stuff, particularly small stuff like arm movements and posing during conversation, is a little off. Which again, is a problem if you're going to fill your game with this stuff. Now, I'd like to acknowledge the voice acting cast for this game, because they've actually got a diverse and interesting array of different accents for the characters in this game, which in my books is pretty neat. It's refreshing to have something other than just an all-American voice acting cast. I mean, we got Northerners, Welsh people, an Australian guy. The casting for this game is pretty damn cool, and I'm glad they paid a little tribute to the British voice localization of the original game. The actual voice acting, however, is a little fucking atrocious. Some of the delivery of the lines in this game is pretty fucking weak, which is partly down to the fact that a lot of the writing itself is pretty shallow and lame. Which again, story-driven game, needs good dialogue. I don't know how much this is down to being lost in translation from the original Japanese version, considering this is a JRPG, but some of the lines of dialogue in this game are just unnatural and a little embarrassing. The game is pretty big on the whole open world thing, which can often be a very bad thing for a game to be so insistent on. But Xenoblade 2 does a pretty good job of it. The style and overall design of this game is nice and consistent throughout. The very earthy yet steampunky style fits, and the environments are wide open and pretty to look at as well. There is a little bit of a lack of playable characters in this game, which I guess is made up for by the swath of blades that you can collect, which I guess are each a different character themselves. But almost feels like this was a design choice to limit the amount of characters they had to animate in the cutscene. There is something pretty big missing from this game, however. An exclusion choice that is even worse than the voice acting in this game. They didn't put any whoopers in it. Come on. Come the fuck on. Really? Again, a Nintendo exclusive and they don't put any fucking whoopers in it? Why the fuck not? They put in these fucking assholes and not this guy? Really? It just boggles the fucking mind. I don't understand why developers are still not woke to this. It's just such a big missed opportunity. This game is not only overshadowed by its terrible voice acting and poor delivery, but also by its lack of whooper. Reggie, it's time for you to get your shit together, okay? This isn't a fucking joke anymore. The next time a Switch exclusive doesn't have any whoopers in it, I will post an obscene image on Miiverse. Oh, wait.